Hi there.
Good morning.
So while Samantha's just preparing the slides, I'll do a quick introduction. So our next speaker is Samantha Snabes. She's the co-founder and the catalyst for the company Re3D, where she facilitates connections between other printing companies and on the human scale, and makes use of recycled materials as well in their processes, and do this for locally driven manufacturing. And the remit of their activities is astounding and encompasses over 50 plus different countries around the world, which is an amazing, remarkable feat. So we're looking forward to your talk, which will again give us a bit of an industry perspective of things. And I hand the floor over to you. So when you're ready, Samantha.
Thank you so much. Yeah, so as was shared, I'm Samantha. I consider myself a co-founder and a catalyst, basically everyone's number two for Re3D. And we've had the honor of working over the last couple of years at the University of Lorraine and Michigan Tech, and Dr. Pierce, are so thankful for all they're doing to promote open source and 3D printing. So I'd love to share a little bit, less of a lecture today, and per the agenda, I consider ourselves a case study and one of these open source business models. So I welcome your feedback. Please find me on LinkedIn. My last name's unusual. And our team would love to give you a virtual tour of our factory. If you check out our website, I'll put it into chat afterwards. So for context at Re3D, we say we are 3D printing with purpose. And that's because we were inspired originally by our travels through Engineers Without Borders, NASA Johnson Space Center. So Engineers Without Borders is an organization similar to Doctors Without Borders, if you've heard of them, but where you have the privilege of working with communities to help design solutions. So at the time I was working for NASA with my friends, and we were assigned to a village in Muganero, Rwanda. And what's interesting is we spent a lot of time and money trying to bring in tools and patented technologies and getting approvals to support the community's needs. But when we arrived, and we're very naive, what we learned is that oftentimes the solutions couldn't be maintained. It could be a poor cultural fit, and for instance, something could be the wrong voltage. And because a lot of these technologies were closed off, they'd end up laying in a pile of, laying in the sun, at a hospital outside of the building instead of being used, or outside of an orphanage we were at. And so that was really disheartening for me. But what I recognized more is seen here in this blade of grass, where I thought it was funny and showing some kids how to make a flagellant sound on it, is that blade of grass quickly went from being a toy to being used to bind a burlap sack, and was used in a multitude of ways. And a parallel theme that was going on at the time was the rip-rap movement, as was highlighted earlier. And Brooke Drum had the printer bot, which my soon-to-be co-founder had at home, and he was talking about we'd use the large 3D printers professionally, about how this was going to change the world. So I became a frequent user in our travels of composting toilets and 3D printing with an open source platform through Matthew. So to be funny, I made a little green toilet, seen here as one of my first prints, and quickly that became a company by accident. So for context, at the time in 2013, it's largely the same now. There's desktop printers such as the printer bot and the many printers that were spawned during 2009-10 and the open source movement. And on the other end of the spectrum, there are large industrial systems, but they can be cost prohibitive. By the time you look at the feedstocks that often have to be warrantied or purchased from the vendor, the service layer agreements and other hardwares, they can be quite expensive. So thinking back to our friends in Rwanda, and at the time I should mention I was a social entrepreneur in residence for NASA headquarters. I started talking to some of the groups, and particularly in Rwanda, Nicaragua, and Mexico that we had met, and asked them if they had a 3D printer, what they would make. And they talked about the composting toilets and birthing stools, tools, and just a whole range of objects. But they quickly pointed out that if I wanted to be well-intentioned and provide one of these open source printers, which some of them I were starting to see in schools and in aid scenarios, they just weren't big enough to make the things they wanted to use, which were functional. And maintaining a large industrial system didn't seem to make a lot of sense. So I started to maintain a blog through Engineers Without Borders and NASA, and started to look at this concept of open source. I'd been invited by NASA or the Maker Faire movement to start presenting in the open source hardware summit and groups about translating space technology to Earth in an open way. And so I centered on 3D printing, not intending to have a company, but just to have a conversation. So it was through that experience, through working through the space agency and the US, I was able to start to explore what that would look like. And then lo and behold, in 2013, we got a letter from the president of Chile that said that we were invited to participate in a program called Startup Chile, which was going to give us $40,000 to take this idea in our head, but we started to center on around a large 3D printer that was under $10,000 US, which at the time was a purchasing threshold for many nonprofits on their credit card, that could maybe someday be powered by local resources. So with that in mind, I quit my job first, and then my teammates followed. I moved to Chile, and my co-founder Matthew, who is still working at Johnson Space Center, said, "I think I can do this in 8 weeks, but printing from garbage is really hard." He said, "But I think I can take this desktop system and I can scale it up to be around 600 millimeters cubed in 8 weeks if we keep it open source." So we started maintaining a blog, and Startup Chile thought it was pretty amusing that we thought we could do this in 8 weeks. So they said if we did it, they had a booth at a tech festival called South by Southwest in Texas, which was convenient for us. And they said that we could get free passes, and I could launch the product on Kickstarter to see if other people wanted it. So we called the concept Gigabot. It was actually almost named Goliath or Big Bertha because we were fighting about it until the last minute. And from Chile, I pushed click on Kickstarter, and the team drove the very first prototype that Matthew made in 8 weeks over from Houston to Austin, which is a little bit funny because it, he built it in his living room, and we took pictures of it for Kickstarter, and then he went to take it to Austin, but it didn't fit through the door. So he had to take it apart, put it in the back of his truck, drive it to Austin, and then build it real time. And little did we know, some of the first people to walk through the door was the media, and TechCrunch announced that 3D printing was now bigger than a bread box, and we were funded in 27 hours. And then quite quickly we learned from the community as we started to distribute these systems that, there's still a lot of education around 3D printing, as Dr. Pierce and others have pointed out. So we started to we also saw an opportunity as we did 100 hours plus of testing of each unit to offer contract printing and design and training and materials testing as we help people explore where this makes sense for them. And what we learned from Kickstarter too is that while we were thinking about our friends in Muganero, Rwanda, nobody in Muganero bought a printer on Kickstarter. It was hospitals in the US and veterinary clinics, and it was universities around the world, it was research labs and manufacturers of all sizes. Because what we learned is what the common theme was is people everywhere are problem solvers. They're inherently creative. And whether it was 2013 or today, as we now support users, I think actually as of this week in 60 countries, is people want to be economically independent, and they want to they want an opportunity to innovate. So again, where we came in was in cost and scale, and I would say that while Matthew is very brilliant, the reason we could do that, make that printer in 8 weeks, is because we built it off of open source design. So the open source flavor is in our roots. We've been honored to stay bootstrapped because we chose an open source model. It makes us without IP, and in order to maintain our social focus, we found that we've had to be independent and not give up equity of the company. And it's been really great, and we're honored to share that we've secured over 10 million in revenue. But as you know, hardware is hard. And that means that as we do versioning, as we grow with the community, we need additional resources. So we've done Kickstarter 2 other times. We use that crowdfunding as a way for us to introduce the product to the market, to find out who's interested in it and why, and to get feedback. Those customers tend to be a little bit more forgiving when we screw up. And then we've pursued a number of grants in order to fund our future vision. Unfortunately, once you stand up a factory and you have inventory and you're maintaining customer support, versioning is really critical, and documentation. And so then pursuing other evolutions of your product can be really difficult, even if you are open source. So we've been honored to have a number of awards. In that process too, as you'll see in the middle here, we encountered 3 hurricanes in 6 weeks that took out 2 of our offices, both in Puerto Rico, homes of our teammates, and impacted our factory operations in Houston. We've obviously all been impacted by COVID, but I would submit to you the reason that we're still around is because we are open, because we are bootstrapped, and because we are beholden to the community that backs us. So we maintain a model where we give away 1 printer for every 100 we deliver to someone trying to make a difference in their community. That's been really interesting for us, and we've tried to be transparent about where those go, because oftentimes as we identify the winner, which is chosen by the community via video submission, we start to see trends early on that maybe some of our industry partners haven't observed by groups that are still collecting the resources and making the business case. So we've been honored to support those users. And then we've been very bullish in sharing what's been our ultimate vision, which is to modify the printer to directly accept plastic waste as the feedstock. These are 3 images taken from outside of our office in Puerto Rico, and wherever you sit today, this is the same case for you, where anywhere from 90 to 98% of plastic, depending on where you live, is not reclaimed. So we saw opportunity to modify our printer. Admittedly, initially we were thinking about using recycled filament, the rope-like material that takes that feeds or extrudes plastic waste into the printer, or using recycled filament that is the rope-like material that our printer used to print with in the Gigawatt line. But there's so many groups, some of which will be highlighted today, that have provided an opportunity to resell that on the market. And because there's an extra heat cycle that goes into that reduces recyclability and the cost of spooling it, we saw opportunities to expand the conversation around directly shredding up plastic waste and then putting it into the printer to make an object. We also learned that this unlocks a whole host of other jobs and opportunity, which is close to our social mission around the product design. Some people highlight today the products that are sold, the economic models around it in the studies, as well as monetizing the collection, sorting, and processing of the feedstock. Now, we were pretty confident we could do this because we're a bunch of space geeks, and through the hurricanes and coming from NASA, we've had a lot of community support of people that have advocated and helped us problem solve online as we've shared where we've gotten stuck. We also have an awesome mascot that's our dog. And more importantly, we have been really humbled to receive some research funding as we've been telling our story. So particularly the National Science Foundation has helped us first look at modifying our printer through funding to basically be a big hopper that allows us to print with pellets from recycled waste, and then started to pursue the innovations to actually take shredded up plastic trash and pour it directly into the printer. And thanks to collaborators along the way, such as Michigan Tech and Dr. Pierce, and early customers such as University of Lorraine, and this funding, and a lot of interns, we have been able to print from trash. So seen here is just some ground up failed prints that we first put in there, and then over time we've gotten better and better at using different waste streams. Admittedly, some work well and some have a long way to go, but we try to do our best to share that journey. And then realizing that the innovation is very expensive, and apologies if anyone's had heard us talk before, we started presenting at a number of conferences and startup pitch competitions, one of which gave us $1 million, which was probably the best night of my life, and was very needed. The other thing that we've tried to do is in our open source business model is to start to sell our printers from day one. So with all of our grants, and which has helped us recruit more of them, we've introduced the technology in beta. So it's almost like a crowdfunding campaign. So in the National Science Foundation, right away in our phase 1 going to phase 2, we said, okay, we think we made this prototype. If anyone wants to buy it, we'll sell it to you. We also put it on Kickstarter. And then we've continued to do that with other awards, which has been really great. So the customers are highly vetted. They know that they're getting the early gen, and the future versions will be different. Gigawatt X has yet to be considered fully commercialized. It will be in the next couple months with some additional features. And we're so honored by everyone who's taken the risks, some of which are on this call, to help us figure out where this technology needs to go. We've also had the opportunity to work on other awards as we start to think about printing from paste and printing from thermosets. and to go larger and larger. What we find particularly in the waste conversation, whether it's recycled filament or shredded up waste, is people want more throughput. So we had the honor to be supported by a Department of Defense grant to start to explore what we call exabot. And then with just a little twist to tickle your brain, during the pandemic, both the Department of Defense, our friends at Habitat for Humanity that we collaborate with, as well as the Puerto Rican Science and Research Trust, which backs some of our support, applied research and PR, has asked us to take a shipping container and to modify it to be able to print, house the printers and all the materials to either print with waste or even virgin materials as we think about on-demand manufacturing with the PPE crisis and beyond. We were approached by that because we have a policy around open community engagement. So wherever we have a location, we try to double down with the community, work with municipalities, work with manufacturers, work with nonprofits, and to work with the local academic community to start to think about where the technology fits in and how we can better support the community, even not in just the garbage conversation. So in Austin, what that looks like is, we've had the honor of getting 2,000 pounds of garbage destined from landfill from HID Global and grinding it up and putting it into the printer to make objects for the Habitat for Humanity Restore in their community, in partnership with the City of Austin and the Austin Technology Incubator. In Houston, we look at taking pellets made from 2D toner cartridges that have been pelletized and using it as a colorant to add color to other waste with ION in the City of Houston. And in Puerto Rico, it's taking manufacturing waste and water bottles from the island left over from the hurricanes and using it to create things and to provide education to the local community. But it's a lot of work. For those of you on the call that knows us, sometimes we've done a really good job, I think, in our open business model, and there's a lot of opportunity for us to get better. We are only a team of 20, but we try, and we took a pause on this during the pandemic and hold us accountable to getting back up to speed. But we try on our website, if you go to re3d.org, to host stories, blogs, videos, pictures, case studies. We've done our best with Dr. Pierce and other groups and want to publish more. Please approach us and help us be more aggressive with it. In open access journals, we now have a postdoc on our team that is committed through the University of Texas to help us publishing more. We maintain a GitHub, so I hinted at the commercialized version of Gigabyte X. And some new features coming online that does include a front-mounted touchscreen. So, we're now migrating our firmware to Clipper. If you know what that is, we want you to check it out. We have a GitHub where we're regularly posting updates as we break things. Please comment on it. We try to share updates that include the good, bad, and ugly. So if you go to the support tab of our website, we have a knowledge base, and we try our best to share what's working and what's not. This is particularly important with Gigabyte X. Our users, for every month except for last month when I forgot, which is embarrassing, we try to have an opportunity for all of these early customers, particularly in the waste conversation, to come together if they want in a monthly meeting. And then we provide updates on what we've learned just in 30 days because the technology is changing so much. For a period of time up until the pandemic, and now we're picking it back up again, we were posting designs monthly on Thingiverse and Colts 3D and other design platforms. So if we did a print for marketing, we tried to share it with the community. We maintain documentation on parts. This becomes tricky with versioning as our build of materials is changing almost every day right now with the pandemic, as well as having some upcoming products. So typically what we do is we try to get the technology to a certain point and figure out how to share it. And then speaking regularly at events like this. So this is how we interpret what it means to have an open business model. This doesn't also include, providing a case study and a report after every grant. We try to share that with the community in the appropriate forum, but we welcome your feedback and other ways with our small team and limited resources that we can maintain an open model. And I do want to just thank, particularly these organizations that have contributed a lot of support to where we are today and to all of you. So at this point, I'd love to hear your feedback, and hopefully we can connect online and answer any questions that you may have.
That's great. Thank you so much there, Samantha. That's a really, really interesting talk, and I'm sure it's probably sparked a lot of questions in our delegates' minds. I was particularly fond of seeing your Major Paddy, was it? Your mask up, put
Major
your hand on
Patty.
your teeth.
Yeah, Major Patty is sleeping on the floor because it's still pretty early today. Well, I don't know if you can see him.
Oh, well, we won't disturb him. And I can see that Joshua is already off and away with a question, and I'll hand over to you.
Great. So Samantha, thanks. It's always inspiring to hear you talk. Something that you mentioned that I didn't know about was the restore work. Could you talk a little bit about what you were doing and the products, or maybe the ones that were the most successful that you were able to print on the Gigabot X?
Yeah, and we need to, I was just thinking, I was kicking myself because I don't know if all those design files made it online. Yeah, so this is really exciting. If you'll excuse me, you know, I should have had it set up, they didn't. So this right here is a polycarbonate die cut skeleton. So this is what, if you were in the military, what your CAC card is probably made from globally. If you have ever driven a car or have an ID card globally, most of this calls from a company called HID Global. And we had the honor of participating in a contest called Reverse Pitch through the city of Boston, whereby some local waste streams were identified, and they asked companies to compete for how they would upcycle it. So obviously we pitched Gigabot X, and then won $10,000 and 2,000 pounds of garbage that got delivered in 3 Gaylords to my garage. And we used that opportunity to hire 2 individuals, recent grads that were unemployed. We implemented a granulator at Habitat for Humanity's Restore in Austin, and they, over 6 months, processed all of that and documented everything. We then, actually, we don't even really have to dry that waste, which is great. And then we started in my garage at University of Texas, where we host a postdoc, and then back at our factory in Houston, we started seeing what we could print. And surprisingly, it prints like a beautiful gray, and we've been able to make objects up to the regular size of Gigabot, which is just under 600 millimeters cubed. We haven't done it on the Terabyte X at a meter, but during the pandemic, we ran 2 pilots. One during a lockdown with our lowest foot traffic ever, and then the second one over Christmas via a silent auction, whereby we showcased a number of different objects, included end tables, stools, vases, and whatnot, and tried to see how many people, despite it being another lockdown in Austin, how many people would buy, or how much people would pay, and the objects were sold for up to $150 each. This is, again, via silent auction, no marketing, in the corner of a thrift store. So that was really exciting. Full disclosure, we are looking at scaling that relationship. We have applied, if anyone's heard of it, to the NSF convergence opportunity between Cicero in Australia, as well as the US National Science Foundation. And our nonprofit partner would be Habitat, as we look at going a step further. A couple things that we're looking at is an open design tool being promoted by University of Texas, or developed by University of Texas, that allows end users to easily design an algorithm, or easily design an object using an algorithm or the dashboard that they've developed. And we want to do that with individuals that are receiving houses while using local waste that will be processed in the GigaLab by unskilled workers to produce things for the community. So we're really excited about that. We think that, you know, those 2 small pilots have provided enough data to show how you could do a closed loop opportunity, printing from waste, which is, you know, if I was to be fair, I think that's been the problem that we've contributed to at times, where oftentimes the printer is not located super close to the waste stream. And it's been difficult to show like actual diversion from a landfill, and or it's not close to the end user. So I know we need to publish on this, and that's something that hopefully Dr. Sessman will help us with. But I'm really excited to share that data. Again, it's still sticks and stones, but I would love to share the objects. The long answer now to your question, Dr. Pierce, is initially the objects we made were you'll see online. Chairs from our first effort. We made a blog, and benches and whatnot. And then we screwed up twice. One, I didn't consider the demographic. And so after sitting as a fly on the wall for a couple of days, I realized a lot of the passerbys spoke Spanish. So we had to redo, and we had to explain what a silent auction was in Espanol as well, which was a miss on our part, having an office in Puerto Rico. And then when we did that, we got more bids, but the feedback we would get in Spanish and English is people, you know, really wanted to have like shelves or vases or planters or smaller objects. They actually didn't want just like a big uncomfortable bench that we had made. So the second time around, we did more of those types of home goods, things that hung on walls. People want modular furniture, so it's more flexible and adaptable. And I think that helped to getting more feedback. The other thing that we learned is that people want to know it's 3D printed. They didn't really care when we post-processed it too much. They kind of liked the idea, at least in that community, of seeing the lines and hearing the waste story too. In scenarios where we talked about it being from waste, it definitely went for more money. And then people obviously want multiple sizes. That being said, people love squirrels. And I don't know how this happened, but we had a scan of a squirrel that a store in Austin was selling, or in New York actually at the time. It was a little like squirrel that could go in your toilet. And that squirrel scan is super popular. So much so, even within our own company, I had to send out an email that was a moratorium on squirrel printing, because we have boxes of squirrels if anyone wants them from waste. And those are a huge hit in the restore, and they actually want to have Habitat's interested in like carrying that as a line, because people like come to the store and ask about the squirrels printed from garbage. So it goes to show you just, someone's waste is someone else's treasure, and beauty's in the eye of the beholder. But I would say modular furniture, you see a lot of people in our community printing from waste focused on that. Things that hang on walls, making sure that you tell the story, and then not worrying too much about having imperfections.
Excellent. Thanks for the response there, Samantha. We have one question in the chat here. Comment from Lucas, which says, this reminds me a lot of precious plastics. Do you have any interactions with any of the people from that organization?
Yeah, and apologies for anyone on here that's received my emails, because I can be a little bit of a psycho. And whenever I hear of someone in garbage, I try to reach out with them, the garbage and 3D printing space. I thought I was being funny, but prior to the pandemic, for the 3 years leading to it, I would reach out to everyone. And then we had I called it an underground mafia of trash printers, trash printing ninjas. And we called ourselves TPU United, so Trash Printers United. And we actually got together a couple of times. The Dutch, as you may be aware, are very active in this. I try to do my best as an open source bootstrap social enterprise to leverage speaking engagements or opportunities through the U.S. Department of State to visit as many groups as we could. So I had the opportunity when they were still in Eindhoven to visit Precious Plastics. And at the time we were bantering about a granulator because they were in their V2 of it. What you'll find when you have limited resources in a big community is, versioning is important. So they were just about to launch the V2 of their granulator while we were still starting ours. So we didn't have an opportunity to collaborate directly, and as you may be aware, they then moved. They're not so focused on 3D printing, but what we see with Gigabyte X, there's two that will be going to Curacao soon, is they often pair really well with the platforms that Precious Plastic has. Particularly, their system for pressing is so cool. Yeah. So we'll see that next to a Gigabyte X as just one more tool in your toolkit. But I know there's been a big evolution in their community, so if any chapters are interested in collaborating, we're all ears.
Excellent. In fact, leading on from that, there was a comment from Mike here, who's expressed an interest to get involved with you. So he was one of our earlier speakers from 3D Printing Cornwall. I myself, it goes without saying, I'd be more than happy to continue any conversations on this front. I am mindful of the time, but I am also aware that you're going to go to another engagement. So I'm going to take presenters' privileges and just have one final question. I'm sorry, Fabio. I noticed you just put your hand up. This was more spurred from some of my students who've had conversations with me about 3D printing, realizing there's waste out there and thinking to themselves, well, is there an opportunity once I've graduated to go out into the wide world and to start up an organization myself? So what words of advice would you give somebody who's trying to start a journey similar to yours and perhaps looking to make their impact on the world?
Yeah, first I would typically put my LinkedIn in here and our website, but I can't figure out how to activate the chat. So if someone can put in re3d.org and my LinkedIn, I'm happy to chat with anyone individually. We need more people in this space. As you showed on that one slide, it's a big ecosystem. And as I suspect Fabio and Joshua can share, there's a lot of work that still has to be done, and we welcome the hands. What I believe is that one, there's no stupid question, only the questions that haven't been asked. And two, the best that you can do is start early. There's just so much need in this space. I wasn't intending to quit my job at the time for NASA, but it was through Kickstarter and getting funded in one day and being in 23 countries in one day that I realized there was a need to serve the community. But if I hadn't taken that risk of putting what you'll see is a very ugly picture of Gigabot, the electrical box is on the floor, it's taken in a living room, there was no high-end marketing on it. What I learned is that, people were interested in getting that unit and co-developing. So I would say definitely just take the risk, put yourself out there, even if it's just a blog like we did initially through Engineers Without Borders to see what the community has to say. Anytime you can get in front of someone that's, not your girlfriend or boyfriend or parents or neighbor or someone that loves you is an opportunity to learn and to have an open dialogue about where you should go. So start now, reach out to us if you get stuck. Don't be afraid to fail. I do every day. And as you'll see on the knowledge base, and we really hope that we can advocate for you to join the conversation.
Oh, that's amazing. And in fact, be careful what you wish for. I will now embed those into my lecture slides that any of the students may contact you directly for anything in this space. But that's very generous of you to make that offer.
We give tours once a month online and every day in between for people that can't make it. So Charlotte and the team would love to show you around our shop and show you where things are.
Gives me an excuse to get back to Austin as well. That would be amazing. Yeah. So thank you very much once again, Samantha. It's been an absolute pleasure hosting you and hearing more about the company. And thank you for your time.